Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Davin Salvagno. I'll tell you all about Davin in just a moment. Grace Under Pressure is that show that deals with what we often dismiss as the soft stuff, the caring, the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it from a leadership perspective, as you will definitely discover that Davin is, you do it for a singular purpose, to bring people together for common cause. Davin Salvagno, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
And it's great to be here. Thank you so much. Big fan of your work, and just grateful to be spending this time.
Great. I'm gonna ask you just to come a little bit closer to the microphone, if I could, please. And one more time. There we go. I want to tell folks all about you. You're the founder and CEO of Purpose Point and co-founder of the upcoming Purpose Summit, which is in mid-May. And you're also the book called Finding Purpose at Work. You are an inspirational speaker and thought leader, and you are a connector, as you connected me, and we know many, many people in the same field. You've held various leadership roles, even including finance and HR, I expect, not finance, way cool. And you have sold lots of companies around the nation and the world. So Davin Salvagno, welcome to Grace Under Pressure.
John, thank you so much. Again, great to be here. Big fan of your work. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Great. Davin, we are living in a time of upheaval due to the pandemic and other things going on. So what is the Great Resignation, as we call it? Some call it. I call it the Great Liberation, because I think employees are winning. What is this changing our perception of purpose, do you think?
Absolutely, John. And I love it. The fact that everyone is renaming the Great Resignation just tells you how big a deal this is. I love that. The Great Liberation. I call it the Great Awakening. I heard friends call it the Great Escape. There's so many different things that it's been renamed. But here is what it is. Whatever you call it, as you said, employees are winning. There has been a massive shift in terms of people's eyes being open to what matters when it comes to work and what they do. And what they've discovered is that the number one thing that matters to them is purpose. It's meaningful work. It's being able to make a difference every day. If I'm trading my time for a company, how do I work every day? That's what it is. They're awake to that idea. And if they're not getting that, John, they're leaving. And that's what's led us to the Great Resignation.
I think you're so right. And I like to joke that the war for talent is over and employees have won. So anyway, so let's shift into, because what's happening now between May 17 and May 19 is something called the Purpose Summit, which will be at the University of Notre Dame. And boy, that is painful for me as a Michigan guy to say, but it is going to be there. Anyway, what was the idea behind this Purpose Summit, Davin?
Well, John, I know you and I know a lot of people in what I've come to call the purpose space, all of the different thought leaders, authors, speakers that are really talking about purpose in the right way, why it's important, why organizations need to take hold of it and put it at the center of their strategy, the forefront of their marketing, the epicenter, really all that they do. And what we decided years ago, actually, and this was pre-COVID, in 2019, myself and several other speakers were traveling to different organizations, different conferences, speaking at different summits, talking on the concepts of individual and organizational purpose, and how when you connect these two things, Hubert Joly, the author of The Heart of Business, would say that when you connect these two worlds, that's where human magic happens, right? This is where there's a spark that happens when individuals understand how their purpose contributes to something greater than themselves in an organization, that the work that they do matters. And organizations take an active interest in the purpose of their employees, not just getting them excited about the purpose of the organization, but taking an active interest in who they are as a person, who they want to become, what they want to achieve, and helping them do that in their roles in the workplace. And so, in 2019, we said, why don't we actually have an event that fosters that conversation? Day one on individual purpose, day two on organizational purpose. And we did. And hundreds of thought leaders, authors, speakers, businesses from around the world came to Detroit, which is just south of our office here in Rochester, Michigan. And it was an incredible 2 days, John. And we decided in 2020, we're going to do it again. And of course, we were all greatly impacted by COVID as the world shut down for the next 18 months. And then last year in 2021, we were adamant that we had to do the summit again. And we were very constricted here in Michigan, as you know. We couldn't do conferences in 2021. The gates were still not open, but we could do theater events. We could use schools. We could do outdoor events. So we got very creative last year, and we found a cool little town called Mount Clemens, which is about 40 minutes north of Detroit, about 2 hours north of where you're at in Ann Arbor. And we used a theater, a historic theater called the Emerald Theater. We put 300 people in that theater because that was capacity, and we had keynotes in there. We used university across the street for breakout sessions. We used 25% capacity of the schoolrooms, and then we put a tent over the main street and closed the streets, and we used outdoor seating, and it was an amazing, incredible 3 days. Friends of ours, Richard Sheridan, I know that he's a mutual friend of ours. He's down in your neck of the woods. He's from Mount Clemens. He spoke with so many other people. And I'll end on this on the summit. We had an organization called Lippert. They're one of the greatest examples of what I say what good looks like when it comes to organizational health and a company championship. They sent 26 leaders, John, from South Bend, Indiana, where their headquarters is, to the Purpose Summit in Mount Clemens in the middle of a pandemic in 2021. And it was so powerful. Their vice president of leadership and culture, Dr. Amber Selking, who just wrote a book called Winning the Mental Game. She happens to also be a collegiate mental performance coach at the time, was the mental performance coach of Notre Dame football. You can see where this is going. She came up to us after the summit and said, these 3 days were absolutely transformative. We need to do this next year at Notre Dame. And so that is how we ended up at Notre Dame, and why hundreds of leaders from around the world, May 17th, 18th, and 19th, are coming together for this all-important conversation in South Bend.
Great. What a great story. And I love the Mount Clemens thing about, you were very purposeful in finding the right space and making it work to your purpose, shall we say. So what's the takeaway what do audiences tell you about this, their experience, Davin? So.
I mean, what's really cool, John, is our opening speaker this year. His name is John Colavito. I didn't know John Colavito until the summit last year. He was someone who came to the summit as an attendee. Like I said, what do audiences tell you? And, he actually came to the summit looking to get, and he wouldn't mind me saying that on this podcast. He was there to network. He was there to meet people. He was there to meet other like-minded people. Mm-hmm. And something incredible happened. In the very first day, I'm not going to spill his beans because he's going to share this in his talk. Something happened that forced him to be fully mentally and physically present for 3 days. And no matter how much he tried to get out of the summit, he found himself always giving more. And the more he gave, the more he got out of it, not intentionally. And he walked away from the summit completely transformed, actually ended up leaving his current role that he was in, starting a company, writing a book, all in a matter of 6 months leaving the summit, and transformed his entire life. We have another company that they have a great culture. I mean, really a really great culture. They're actually a client of ours at Purpose Point. And I've known the CEO of that company for years. And he came to the summit. He sat present all 3 days, and he didn't have his team there this year. It was just him that was there. But he sat there, and he, again, great culture. But after the summit, sent me a text message and said, these 3 days were absolutely indescribable. And I thought we were doing great, but man, we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to need some help along the way. And we've been able to walk alongside them for the last year. And this year they're returning, and they're bringing their entire senior leadership team with them to create alignment across the organization. So the 3 days obviously are inspirational. They're informative. They're insightful. They're transformative. And I could sit here for hours and talk testimonies, but I know we have a short time together.
That's great. No, I want you to recite all of them. But you raise an interesting point with the first gentleman that you talked about. And I wrote an article recently, and it was sparked by something that a Marine veteran, Elliot Ackerman, who's since become worked for Wall Street Journal and become an author, and teamed up with Admiral Stavridis on one particular book, but he's quite prolific and a very eloquent man. And he said that when as a soldier and in combat, he said, your life, everything is so vivid. It is incredibly purposeful. And when you come home, you will never replace that. You will never find that again. So it got me thinking, and I talked to some other vets about this, and not just to make this military thing, but I think we have, and I think this is a good note for your summit. We can rediscover a new purpose for ourselves. Would you agree with that, Davin? So,
yeah, I think that I think one of the myths of purpose is that everyone thinks that there's just one, right? And there's not. I have a purpose as a business leader. I have a purpose as an author. I have a purpose as a speaker. But more importantly, I have a purpose as a husband. I have a purpose as a father. I have a purpose as a friend. I know we both share an affinity for music and playing the piano. I have a purpose as a worship leader at church, right? And so, it's why I keep those things in the backdrops of these talks, is because we have several. People would call it hats that you wear, but realistically, there are several purposes that you exist for. And I think wherever the moment, wherever your feet are, right? If you're present wherever your feet are and you're taking in that moment, you get clarity of what your purpose is in that moment. Now, what doesn't change are the gifts that are within us, right? That are tied to our purpose in those roles. So for instance, people would say that I have a gift of encouraging, a gift of inspiring, and a gift of teaching. Those are ingrained in my purpose. So I could say that my maybe grandiose purpose is to engage and to inspire and to teach others. How do I do that, though, as a business leader, as a husband, as a father, as a worship leader, as a speaker, as an author, all of those things? So I think we discover new ways to deliver on our purpose in new settings and in front of the people that we find ourselves with.
I love that. That's very eloquent. I love the way you dimensionalize purpose and application. And it resonates with something that a little bit contrarian view. There's a professor here at the University of Michigan, and she's a sociology professor and associated with the Institute for Social Research. And she sort of a contrarian when it comes to purpose, and not in a dismissive way, but the fact that not all of us can find our purpose in our work. You and I are fortunate, Davin. We are doing purposeful work that enriches us, and we hope enriches the lives of others. But not all of us have the same kind of thing. But we all do have a purpose in our life, and we talked about this. Is if we're doing a job which is not totally to our satisfaction, we have other concerns. If you hit them, my church, my family, all of these things, and that's what resonates too. And I like the way you dimensionalize that. Do you comment on it? So
yeah, no, I agree. And I would say this, because I get that, I kind of get that contrarian view a lot from people like, well, not every job has purpose. And I would disagree with that politely, because I would say it depends on how you define it. If you tie purpose to the gifts, talents, and abilities that we have within ourselves, if you got up and you went somewhere other than converting oxygen into carbon dioxide, you did something that had an impact, whether that was you showed up at the manufacturing plant and you worked on the line and you put two pieces together that ended up becoming a car, or you drew something, or you entered data. We could take that, or you picked up the trash. I don't know, but you did something that had an impact on another human being. And whether you like it or not, it had purpose. So every work has purpose. It's just understanding, what did I do? How did I use my time or my gifts or my talents to do something that had an impact on another human being in some way? And if you can identify that, you have found the purpose in your work.
Well, that's very powerful. And that's interesting, because one of the things that I'm writing about and exploring and talking about is turning the workplace into a sense of community. Mm-hmm. And if we view it as community, then we're melding ourselves to a larger purpose. So we have a question from a regular listener, Joe, who wants your take on this. He said, why do you think people leave a business or leave a company to find purpose? What if someone comes to you and say, I'm lacking in purpose, Davin, where do I go? What do you say? So
that's a really good question. And, I would say that up until recently, many people didn't. It really started in 2017, 2018. You can read all sorts of HBR blogs and articles and Gallup polls that back in 2018, 2019, people were leaving jobs and actually taking less money to go to another job for more meaning, for more purpose. And that really hadn't happened prior to. I mean, there were some people that did, and maybe they got mislabeled as job hoppers, or maybe they actually were. But the reality is 47.4 million people left in the last year during the quote unquote Great Resignation. And the number one thing that they were looking for was not more pay. They were looking for work-life integration, not work-life balance, and more purpose and more meaning in what they do. And I think there's a couple contributing factors to that. So one is, I don't think up until 2017, people realized that they had the option. So something happened in 2017 for the first time in history where there were more job openings than there were people available to work them. The tables had turned. So you mentioned earlier that talent had won. Part of the reason for that is because up until 2017, jobs were scarce. It's the reason that what is the narrative of every single political campaign: create more jobs, create more jobs, create more jobs. Well, in 2017, there was an excess of jobs. And so people now realize that they had a choice. And so now they can actually prioritize what it is that they wanted to do, what it is that they were good at, over where they had to be. And that choice wasn't available to them prior. And so since obviously jobs have become more, availability of work has become less, the equation has exasperated itself. And I think the other thing is that in this last 2 years, we've come face to face with our mortality. COVID awoke in our eyes to say, you know what, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Like the whole go to school, get a great education, work for a company for 30 years, retire, get the gold watch, and then start living your life. Those days are over, because I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. And so people have a sense of urgency to want to make each day count.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that is not talked about, and for obvious reasons, so much about our pandemic is loss, and certainly loss of loved one. It's close to 1 million people just in the United States, but also, people lost jobs initially, even though because businesses didn't know how to cope or adjust or whatever, and especially in the retail sector and restaurants, all of that. So there was a great loss, and some people found their identity lost because they weren't, physically present in work. And so everything was up in the air. And so I would say, and what's your take on purpose became even more vital? Would you agree with that, Davin? So
I would say that purpose became the currency, essential even, right? I mean, people used to trade time for money, and they still do. I'm not saying that they don't. Pay is still important. But I would say that purpose and meaning has now become a more superior factor, that people are trading time for purpose and meaning, for a sense of partnership, a sense of making a difference. And so if you as an organization aren't articulating very clearly that if I am going to give you my time, how am I finding meaning and fulfillment for the time that I now realize is limited? I realize, I'm not immortal. I can't live forever here on this earth. That there's a number over my head, and there's nothing that I can do to add a single day to it. Now that we've been awakened to that, how are you articulating as an organization? Thank you. If you're going to give us your time, here's the sense of purpose and meaning that we are going to make sure that you feel, that you feel valued, that you feel treated like a human being and not a human doing, and that you can see the difference that you're making. So purpose, in essence, has become the currency of the marketplace.
Okay. You have a long history in working in this, and you wrote a book called Finding Your Purpose at Work. What led you to that journey and putting it down in book form, Davin? So,
thanks, John. I appreciate that. The book ended up being two things. One, it ended up being a little bit of my personal story, not an autobiography, but a little bit of my story, because I shared the journey of kind of how I met, I guess you could say, the work of purpose, and 20 plus years ago, and how it showed up, and kind of how I found purpose in the workplace. So literally the meaning, finding purpose at work, literally, how do you find purpose in your work? How do you identify your role and what you bring? How do you become a difference maker? That's the subtitle, is Hello, I'm a Difference Maker. In the work that you do every single day. And it was written from two perspectives, both from a personal perspective, but then also from a leader perspective. I often say that the greatest measure of purpose is who we help others become. So how are you finding your purpose as a leader in helping others find theirs in the work that they do every day? And a lot of the concepts that we talked about here, whether it's the talent currency shift or it wasn't called the Great Resignation then, but we alluded to it in the book. It's in there, but there's a piece of the book that constantly gets missed, John, and it's this. I can look back at my life at different things that happened that then in the moment I questioned, why is this happening to me? Or why is this not happening for me? Or whatever it is. We have a tendency as human beings to question the moment because we're not looking at things from an eternal lens or from the future looking back. But when we look from our current standpoint back, we can often connect dots and see how, wow, if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened and this wouldn't have happened. And so I kind of look back and say, if you take a close look at your life, you could actually find purpose as if it had its own persona, purpose at work in your life, leading you down this path of where you are. And from that, you can glean insights into where you may be going or where you may need to go. So what caused me to write the book, John, was a little bit of me feeling that, hey, there is this purpose shift happening and we need to identify it. People don't know what it is or how to find it. So we need to give them a guide. Ken Blanchard was very kind to write the foreword, and he called it a blueprint to helping find your purpose when it comes to work. And those are very kind words. But the other reason is because I think we don't take sufficient time to actually look back over our lives, connect the dots, understand how we arrived at where we're at, and then glean from that maybe where we need to go moving forward.
Oh, you raised a very critical point, and that's something I talk about a lot in coaching. And you didn't use the word, but really what it is, it's reflection. And it's because we are so much in a hurry. I think and then the other part is a colleague of ours, Tasha Eurich, always talks about is in her wonderful book Insight, is about self-awareness and how lacking, I think just exactly what you just said, how lacking in self-awareness we really are. And so it takes that discipline to look inside. And it also takes a fair amount of courage to discover and deliver on your purpose. Would you, what's your perspective on that, Davin? So.
Absolutely. And it's getting harder each day because if there's one thing that you could look at when it comes to our world, the speed of it seems to just be accelerating and accelerating. So we are moving faster and faster and faster. And the faster that we move, the less time that we actually take for self-awareness, for self-reflection, for course correction, for any of those things. And if we honestly, first of all, we want to be honest with ourselves, we all have time. One of the things that people saying is that I don't have time or I'm too busy or no. Our circumstances don't define us. Our choices do. We can choose how we spend our time. And one of the grossly underused pieces of our time is stopping, pausing, reflecting back, understanding what is going on, how we got to where we're at, what's happening in the moment, taking in our surroundings. And that is so critical to understanding how you find purpose in what you do. Because if you're self-aware of what your gifts, talents, and abilities are as a person and as a leader, and you're also aware of what's happening in the environment around you and what other people need, and you can stop in that moment and figure out, how do I take whatever it is that I have in here and help those around me in this moment, then you have found your purpose in that moment. But we're moving so fast that we don't stop for the self-awareness that is so sorely needed to do so.
We're coming close to the end, but we still have some time here. So you've been working in the field of purpose for 2 decades. You wrote a book on it. You're a successful consulting firm in this sector, and you've done multiple conferences on it. Tell me something unexpected that you've learned about purpose. Is there anything?
Well, I kind of continue to be surprised every single day. There's always something unexpected in this space. Here was a big thing that was unexpected. I feel like 10 years ago, we had to convince people that purpose was a thing. Aaron Hurst wrote the book, The Purpose Economy. And in there's this amazing tidal wave image of the purpose economy coming. And it's this idea that, hey, there's this massive thing called the purpose economy coming, where this is going to be the forefront of every conversation. And it's going to impact every sector, every industry, the marketplace, every generation. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a fantastic book. And he had the foresight to see that back in 2012. And I feel like back then we had to convince people that this was going to be a thing. And Worth magazine did an article on this. I wrote an article called "The Great Restoration: How we get people back to work with purpose." And I love the words that they used. They said, despite ample warning that this was coming, people still struggled to find talent and understand why 47.4 million people left last year. And I guess the biggest surprise to me is, with so many books written on the subject, with so many authors speaking about it, with so much ample warning, how are we still here? How have we not figured it out?
Well, I'm one of them who wrote a book called Lead with Purpose. So yeah, I'm asking the same thing.
It's right here. Look, this was written way before Finding Purpose.
Well, the check will be in the mail, Davin. So no, that's great. But I think, you know what it is, and this is a good thing. We don't know it till we know it. So in other words, you prepare things, but the message doesn't resonate, because we're not in that place. But the COVID or pandemic, the lockdown, the shutdown, all the transformation, then we started, and as you said very well, hey, life's not guaranteed and we all got a wake-up call. Hey, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So bingo, that's where it came. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly
so good. So I ask every guest a story if they want to share a story about grace. Do you have something you'd like to share, Davin? So
I do. So if there's only one word that were more important to me in the human language than purpose, it actually is the word grace. So much so that my wife, Amy, who's pictured behind me, her actual name is Amy, but I call her Grace. And the reason why is because, John, when I look at my life, I have been extended much grace, quite frankly, that I don't deserve. And it's what's kept me grateful. It's what's kept me grounded. It's what's kept me others focused. And I think until you understand the magnitude of the grace that you have been afforded, you truly can't understand what it really means to have a selfless, others-focused mindset, and how to really live for impact and not for yourself. Because I recognize how much I just don't deserve. And I call her Grace because she is the most tangible expression of grace in my life. I don't deserve her. I mean, what she does for us, for our family, so that I could do this work is incredible. But then I also look at so many different things, who I used to be, things I've done that I've been forgiven for. And so grace plays a central role in my life. It is literally the most important word, and then purpose being a close second to me.
Well, great. Next year it's going to be called the Grace Summit. Anyway, no, but that's a wonderful story, Davin. And I think you're downselling yourself a little bit because you've given back much. You may not, you feel you have received a lot, but I think you've given quite a bit. And so you're paying it forward, my friend. And that's a good story, and a good shout out to your lovely wife, Amy. And I've asked a lot of people this question, and I think you're the only one who's mentioned a spouse, and that is so. What a wonderful! I mean, they've always spoken fondly of loved ones, of course, but I like the call out there, and it's a good reminder that that grace can be both small things as well as transformative, as it has been for you. So great. So Davin, our time is racing away. How can people find you? So.
Well, I know, John, you and I are both very active on LinkedIn. I'm very, very aware that I have somewhat of a healthy LinkedIn problem. I joke that I actually have 4 homes. I have my home with my family. I have my church home. I have my office home. And then I have LinkedIn. It's kind of like my 4th home. So LinkedIn is the best place to follow me. I'm on there constantly. Of course, I'm also available on other social platforms, be that Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You could go to davinsalvagno.com to learn more about me, about the book Finding Purpose at Work, and of course, purposepoint.com, which is the name of our company, and thepurposesummit.com if you're interested in the summit that we just talked about.
Great. Davin, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I know you're scrambling because the show is just 2 weeks away, or 3 weeks away, and so thank you for sharing time with me today.
John, thank you for being such a gracious host. Appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to spending time together in South Bend in a few weeks.
You got it.